I saw my daughter-in-law, Mia Reynolds, casually tossing my precious granddaughter Lydia's baby blanket into the dumpster. I didn't think twice. An absolute, blinding fury, the quiet, lethal kind only a father knows, propelled my 72-year-old body towards the industrial bins, rescuing that mint-green symbol of my son Charles's love before it was crushed. I grabbed the blanket, thinking of Lydia, and took it straight back to my lonely house, the house that echoed with the absence of my Charles. When I spread it out on my bed, my fingers immediately recognized something alien, something wrong. There was a dense, hard object sewn inside the plush fabric, secreted meticulously between the layers of cotton. An icy cold sense of foreboding, a predator's instinct, replaced my initial anger. I snatched a pair of surgical scissors from the drawer, the very ones I'd kept from Charles's old medical school bag. My hands, normally rock-steady, trembled with anticipation as I cautiously sliced open the seam, tearing through the thread knot by painful knot. And when I finally saw what was concealed within, I felt a deep, sickening shock that rooted me to the spot. I could never have imagined that something so insignificant, so innocuously quiet, could house such an immense horror, because what I found wasn't just some forgotten object. It was the absolute, damning evidence of a betrayal that had festered for years. It was the truth, the monstrous, unthinkable truth, about the sudden, brutal death of my only son, Dr. Charles Vance. It was the single darkest secret that his wife, Mia, had meticulously kept hidden. And the instant I understood the unspeakable implications, I knew, with the chilling clarity of a man whose world has just collapsed, that my life was over, only to begin anew in a crusade for justice. My name is Robert Vance, and I am 72 years old, forced to live alone in this house for 3 years since the September day I lost my brilliant, irreplaceable Charles. He was only 40 years old when he died. It was a dreary Tuesday afternoon, a day I received the frantic, hysterical call from Mia, screaming and crying, telling me that Charles had suffered an accident, that he'd fallen down the grand staircase at their home, hit his head with catastrophic force, and wasn't responding. I arrived at the hospital in a terrifying 15 minutes, driving my sedan like a man possessed, my mind consumed by a terrifying void. When I stormed into the emergency room, Mia was there, a portrait of staged despair, wearing a pearl gray dress with suspicious, dark stains on the cuffs. She saw me and instantly rushed forward, collapsing against my shoulder in a torrent of manufactured sobs. But I barely noticed her performance. I only wanted to see my son. A doctor, his face etched with that universally dreaded expression, delivered the words that annihilated my world. Charles was dead, severe head trauma. Nothing could be done. I remember the primal scream that ripped from my throat, the cold linoleum floor as I collapsed. Mia held me, murmuring meaningless reassurances that Charles would have wanted me to be strong, but there was no strength left. Nothing was all right, and nothing, I knew with absolute certainty, would ever be again. My wife had passed 15 years ago, and now my only son, my pride, my legacy, was also gone. Charles was everything I had left. He was a surgeon, brilliant, driven, and dedicated, spending tireless hours at the hospital saving lives. He had married Mia, a healthcare consultant he met through a charity gala, just 2 years before his death. I remember the afternoon he introduced her to me, dressed in a soft, cream-colored dress, her smile dazzling, yet somehow too rehearsed. But Charles was consumed by a passionate, all-encompassing love. His dark eyes shone when he looked at her. He told me she was the woman he was meant to build a dynasty with, that he desperately wanted a large family, and though I had reservations, I desperately wanted to believe him. wanted to believe my son had found that elusive happiness. A year after the wedding, Mia became pregnant, and Charles was utterly euphoric, calling me daily with updates. They bought a magnificent new house, painted Lydia's nursery a soft, celebratory pink, and Charles himself, the man who performed complex surgeries, proudly assembled the crib. I remember seeing him so completely happy, so full of breathtaking hope. And when Lydia was born, I felt life had gifted me a miracle, a precious second chance at unconditional love. My granddaughter was perfect, small, delicate, with Charles's unmistakable, determined dark eyes. I had knitted that mint green blanket with my own hands. It took me weeks, every single stitch a prayer, a piece of my enduring love for her. Charles treasured it, claiming it was magical, that it instantly soothed Lydia every time he wrapped her inside. But after the accident, everything changed irrevocably. Mia grew distant, cold. Initially, I convinced myself it was grief, that she, too, had lost her husband and needed space. But as the months bled into years, she brought Lydia to see me less and less. Her excuses were rote and thin. Work, illness, reorganization. I tried not to be the meddling patriarch. I waited, called, and begged to visit my granddaughter. Sometimes she conceded. Often, she simply ignored my calls. And even when I was finally allowed to see Lydia, I saw the profound change in Mia. Colder, more calculating. Her gaze had lost all trace of that fake warmth. There was something unsettlingly sharp in her eyes, a cynical calculation that immediately put me on edge. But I forced myself to believe it was grief, that Charles's death had shattered her just as it had shattered me. I offered her empathy, gave her infinite space, until that devastating October afternoon, 3 years after Charles's death. I had bought a lavish new set of educational toys for Lydia, intending to leave them discreetly in the mailbox of Mia's mansion. I parked my car directly across the street, a father's love driving a grandfather's simple surprise, and that's when I saw her. Mia emerged from the garage, dragging several large, black trash bags with a startling, brutal force towards the curb. And there, hanging precariously from one of the bags, was the devastating sight that stopped my heart. Lydia's blanket, the mint green miracle I had knitted with every ounce of my love. Mia violently shoved it deeper into the dumpster, the action saturated with a bizarre hatred, as if she desperately needed to destroy that memory, that connection to my son. I froze, the question a burning coal in my chest. Why? Why discard something so profoundly special, a last tangible memory of Charles, with such malicious contempt? I waited, my breath ragged, a terrifying mix of rage and suffocating grief consuming me. When I was certain she had retreated inside, I got out of the car, walked purposefully to the dumpster, and plunged my hands into the refuse until I found it. There it was, wrinkled, dirty, smelling faintly of expensive perfume and profound neglect. I carefully retrieved it, clutched it tight against my chest, and drove home, the weight of the blanket now a physical burden of my son's tragic past. I arrived home shaking, immediately locking the door and retreating to my study, needing to be alone with that blanket, needing to understand the motive behind Mia's cold-blooded act. I spread it gingerly on my large leather armchair, smoothing out the wrinkles, noting that despite the grime, the lace edges remained firm, the mint green dull under the harsh lamplight. My fingers traced every texture, every single stitch I had painstakingly made years ago. And then I felt it, right in the absolute center, a hard, rectangular lump, deeply embedded within the layers of fabric. It wasn't the stuffing, it was something foreign, something deliberately placed there, My heart rate immediately spiked, a chaotic drum in my chest. What was this artifact? Why was it hidden within my granddaughter's blanket? I turned it over, searching for a sign, and found it. On the bottom edge, almost imperceptible, was a line of precise stitches, made with thread matching the fabric perfectly. Someone had meticulously opened the blanket, inserted this object, and sewn it back up with the deliberate care of a professional concealing a secret. I retrieved my best sewing shears, the ones Charles had once teased me about, and my hands started shaking uncontrollably. I took a slow, agonizing breath, found the start of the seam, and began to cut, slowly, agonizingly. Each tiny sound was a deafening cannon shot in the silence of my study. I felt like I was violating something sacred, something forbidden, but the thirst for truth was now insatiable. I cut the final threads, exposing the opening, plunged my fingers inside, and pulled out something cold, something metallic. When I finally held it up in the light, the air completely escaped my lungs. It was a cell phone, small, black, and based on the model, maybe 4 or 5 years old. I held it like a live grenade, terrified of the secrets it contained. Why had Mia hidden a phone in Lydia's blanket? How long had it been there? Why the professional level of concealment? And why now, after 3 years of silence, had she chosen to discard it all? I found an old charger, plugged in the phone, and waited, the seconds stretching into an eternity of tense anticipation. Finally, the screen flickered to life. There was no password, no security code, opening straight to the main menu, as if whoever owned it had never imagined it would fall into strange hands. My fingers, still trembling, hovered over the screen. I started with the gallery. The icon revealed a flood of images, and the first one froze me solid. It was Mia, stunningly dressed in an elegant restaurant, but she was not alone. A man, young and handsome, was there, his arm wrapped intimately around her shoulders, kissing her cheek. The photo had a clear date stamp, 4 years ago, when Charles was still vibrantly alive, still deeply in love with his wife. A sharp, searing pain tore through my core. I kept swiping. Mia and the same man on a beach, in a luxury hotel, embracing passionately in a parked car. All photos were from 4 years ago. Mia had been having a long, calculated affair, betraying my son with a cold ruthlessness he never suspected. Rage, raw, visceral rage, filled the emptiness in my chest. My beloved Charles had adored this woman, trusted her implicitly, and she had repaid his devotion with this unspeakable treachery. But the horror didn't stop there. I found a separate folder labeled Videos and played the first one. It was a fixed, shaky home recording of Mia and the same man entering the living room. Charles and Mia's living room. I recognized the contemporary gray sofa and the abstract painting he'd bought her. They entered laughing, and their subsequent actions on the sofa were devastatingly, undeniably clear. I immediately stopped the video, feeling physically ill, but the need to know the entire, monstrous truth forced me on. I opened the Messages app. Long, exhaustive conversations between Mia and a contact simply saved as Ethan Hayes. The messages were from 4 years ago, beginning with sickening romantic declarations and transitioning into darker, more desperate exchanges. Mia hated having to pretend with Charles, speaking of my son as if he were merely an annoying impediment, a mere obstacle in her path to happiness. She wrote to this man that she desperately wanted a life with him, but Charles was too traditional, that he would never consent to a divorce, would never let her go. Then came the message that utterly shattered my soul. There has to be another way. I can't keep going like this. I need him to disappear. My hands gave way, the phone clattering onto the thick carpet. I read the message again and again, unable to reconcile the words with reality. I need him to disappear. I snatched the phone back, scrolling further down the thread. The man, E, replied with a worried warning. Don't say crazy things. Just wait. We'll find a way. But Mia was relentless, her desperation escalating with every message. I don't want to wait anymore. I want to be with you now. Charles is the problem. If he weren't here, we'd be free. And then, days later, the message that turned my blood to ice. I talked to someone who can help us. I just need you to trust me. The man, terrified, demanded details. What did you do? Who did you talk to? But Mia offered no specifics, only chilling assurances that soon everything would be resolved, that they would be free, together, and hidden no longer. The messages ceased abruptly just 1 week before Charles's death, as if both conspirators had deliberately stopped using the burner phone, hoping to erase all digital trace. I stood up, my world spinning, the realization a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Mia had planned something sinister. She had discussed making Charles disappear. And a week later, my son was dead. The phrase severe head trauma now rang with a new, horrifying significance. I picked up the phone one last time and navigated to the Notes app. There was a single entry, written 2 days before Charles's death, stark and terrifying. Tuesday, 3:00 p.m. He will be alone. Everything must look natural. An accident. No one can suspect. My legs buckled beneath me, sending me sprawling onto the rug. The uncontrollable tears that followed were not of sadness, but of a seething, righteous rage. My son, my brilliant Charles, had not died in a tragic accident. My son was brutally murdered. And Mia, the woman he had adored and trusted with his life, the mother of his child, had been the monstrous architect of his death. Sleep was impossible that night. I remained rooted in my armchair, the phone in my hands, reading the vile messages repeatedly. My Charles was murdered, and the woman who had sworn a public vow of love had cold-bloodedly orchestrated his death. The tears eventually dried up, replaced by a profound, cold void, a black hole of betrayal that had swallowed every pleasant memory of Mia. By sunrise, a decision had solidified. I could not, would not, remain silent. Mia could not be allowed to walk free, raising my granddaughter Lydia with the same blood-stained hands that had plotted my son's murder. But I needed a strategy. I needed help. I immediately called Kevin, an old business partner of Charles, a man I trusted absolutely. I forced my voice to remain steady, despite the hurricane of emotion swirling inside. Kevin, I need you to come to my house immediately. It's an emergency of the highest order. 15 minutes later, the frantic knocking on my front door announced his arrival. I led him directly to my study, pointed to the blanket and the phone connected to the charger, and began the agonizing retelling. Kevin listened, silent and utterly still, his face morphing from concern to absolute, thunderous shock. When I finished, he picked up the small phone, methodically checking the photos, the video, the messages, the damning note. My God, Robert, this is solid evidence of premeditated murder. I nodded slowly. I know, but I can't go to the police yet. I need more. I need to identify this Ethan Hayes and connect the pieces before I take the next, final step. Kevin sat down heavily, processing the gravity of the conspiracy. We need to look for him on social media. Maybe he's in Mia's contacts. I immediately grabbed my laptop, opened the profile, and navigated to Mia's friends list. I filtered the list for names starting with E and opened Ethan Hayes' profile. And there he was. The identical face, the same dark, arrogant eyes. "It's him," I whispered, the words tasting like bitter ash. Ethan Hayes, 45 years old, lived in the city, worked for a major contracting firm. "See, we have to find him," I stated, the initial paralysis giving way to steely resolve. Kevin cautioned me. "Be careful, Robert. If this man was involved in Charles's death, he is extremely dangerous." I knew the risk, but the deep, abiding love for my lost son and the white-hot fury at his betrayal had completely eclipsed fear. Kevin then presented a terrifying idea. "What if we visit Mia's house? Maybe she's hidden more evidence, documents, emails, something that connects Ethan to Charles's death." It was reckless, but perfectly logical. We need an unassailable excuse. Kevin quickly devised a plan. "You tell her you urgently need to see Lydia. While you distract her, I can discreetly search the main living areas." I sent a text to Mia. "Mia, I know I've been overly persistent, but I miss Lydia unbearably. Can I stop by to see her this afternoon, just for a brief visit?" 20 long minutes later, the reply arrived. "Hi, Robert. Today is absolutely not a good day. Lydia is cranky. Maybe another time." I gritted my teeth. "Please, Mia, only 10 minutes. I bought her a special present. I want to give it to her in person." Another excruciating silence, followed by the grudging concession. "Fine, but only 30 minutes. I have important things to do." At 3:00 p.m., we arrived at Mia's house. I rang the doorbell, my heart hammering against my ribs. The door opened, and there was Mia, impeccable, wearing a cold smile. "Robert," she greeted me. "Come in. Be quick." I stepped inside, the oppressive perfection of the pristine space filling my senses. "Where is Lydia?" I asked. "Upstairs, in her room. I'll get her." Mia glided up the very staircase where Charles had died. She descended, holding Lydia in her arms. My granddaughter was 4 years old now, her eyes the identical, determined eyes of Charles. "Hi, Grandpa Robert," Lydia chirped, extending her little arms to me. I took her, holding her tightly, inhaling the comforting scent of pure, beautiful innocence. I listened to her story while watching Mia, who stood by the window, absorbed in her phone, nervous, distracted. This was my moment. I took out my own phone and sent a silent text to Kevin. "Come in now." A few minutes later, the sharp, unexpected ring of the doorbell cut through the quiet air. Mia jumped, startled. "Are you expecting someone?" I asked, projecting a completely casual, innocent tone. She frowned and reluctantly walked to the door. She opened it, and there was Kevin, impeccably dressed, offering a polite, practiced smile. "Hello. Excuse the terrible interruption. I'm Kevin, Robert's friend. I drove with him, but I'm afraid I left an extremely important briefcase in my car. Can I just step in quickly and use the restroom?" "It's urgent," Kevin asked with a perfect, convincing strain of discomfort in his voice. Mia hesitated, her cold gaze flickering from Kevin back to me. I simply nodded, as if a friend needing a restroom in a house where your son was secretly murdered was the most mundane event imaginable. "Sure," Mia finally conceded, her tone clipped and impatient. "Down the hall. First door on the left." Kevin walked in, throwing me a lightning-fast look of shared conspiracy. I understood. Search until found, and keep the monster distracted. I desperately needed to buy him time. So, Mia, I began, my voice an unnatural, forced monotone of polite concern. How's the workload been? Are you managing everything? The house? Lydia? Your job? It's a lot for one person, even one as capable as you. She replied with curt, dismissive phrases, her eyes constantly darting to her phone and then anxiously down the hallway where Kevin had vanished. She was a coiled spring, desperate for this intrusive visit to end. I pressed on, my voice softening as I brought up the most painful subject. You know, I was just looking through some old photo albums. I found so many great pictures of Charles. I think when Lydia is a little older, I'd like to show them to her, so she can really get to know her father. The mention of Charles immediately caused her entire body to tense. Yes, of course. When she's older, her voice snapped back, harder, laced with an unmistakable resentment. She glanced again towards the hall. Your friend is taking an awfully long time. Maybe he's unwell. I improvised quickly, giving her a slow, weary smile. You know, at our age, everything takes longer than it used to. Mia. She wasn't fooled. She started to rise, her jaw tightening. I'm going to check on him. My heart slammed against my ribs. I had to stop her now. Wait, Mia, I commanded, forcing a strained casualness. So there's just one thing I wanted to ask before we leave. She stopped, her body rigid, glaring at me with predatory impatience. What is it, Robert? I took a deep, steadying breath. It's about Lydia's blanket. The mint green one I knitted for her. I haven't seen it in ages. Are you still using it? For a split second, a fleeting, horrifying instant, I saw raw panic flood her eyes. Then, with the speed of a seasoned liar, she composed herself. The blanket? Oh, yes, of course we are. It's in the washing machine. It got quite dirty. I knew she was a liar. I knew it was trash, the very reason I was here. But I played along. Ah, good. I'm relieved you still have it. Charles loved that thing so much. He used to call it his lucky charm. I deliberately invoked my son's name again, watching for a reaction. Mia pressed her lips together, her eyes flashing with a deep, private bitterness. Yes, well, Charles loved a lot of things, she muttered, the bitterness in her tone undeniable. Before I could respond, Kevin reappeared in the hallway, looking completely nonchalant. Apologies for the delay. Much better now, he said, walking straight towards me. He placed a hand gently on my shoulder. A subtle, decisive pressure. The signal. He had found something. We needed to leave immediately. Well, Mia, we won't trouble you any longer, I said, standing up, the effort of maintaining the facade draining me. Thank you for letting me see Lydia. I kissed my granddaughter's innocent forehead. Grandpa Robert loves you, little one. I'll be back soon. Lydia hugged me tight. Bye, Grandpa. Mia practically shoved us to the door, closing it quickly and violently the moment we stepped outside. Kevin and I walked in strained silence to the car, and the instant the doors were locked, I demanded, What did you find? Kevin reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Ma in her bedroom closet, he reported, his voice tight. Hidden under a stack of old shoeboxes. I ripped open the envelope. Inside were documents detailing Charles's 500 Shizunta life insurance policy, with Mia as the sole beneficiary. The payout collected just 3 months after his death. There were also bank statements revealing a massive transfer, $200,000, to an account bearing the name Ethan Hayes. Oh my God, I choked out, a wave of blinding fury and confirmation washing over me. She paid him. She paid him to help her murder Charles. Kevin nodded grimly. There's more. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, a copy of a birth certificate for Lydia. But the mother's name was not Mia Reynolds. It read, Lydia Torres. Who is Lydia Torres? I demanded, utterly stunned. Kevin shook his head. I don't know, Robert. But according to this document, she is Lydia's biological mother, not Mia. The world seemed to stop. Mia wasn't Lydia's mother, but she had been pregnant. We had all seen her pregnancy. Kevin pointed to the date on the certificate. Look at the date of birth. It doesn't match the timeline Mia gave us. It's off by 2 months. I verified the date. Kevin was right. Lydia had been born months before Mia had ever claimed. This is insane. Did Mia fake a pregnancy? Did she steal a baby? I don't know, Kevin admitted. But we absolutely need to find Lydia Torres. She's the devastating key to this entire nightmare. We drove back to my house and spread the damning evidence across the dining table. The burner phone, the photos, the messages, the insurance papers, the bank transfer receipt, and the birth certificate. The terrifying picture began to coalesce. Mia had meticulously planned Charles's murder to claim the life insurance, using Ethan to execute the fall and paying him with a chunk of the money. But there was a hidden, darker layer. The story of Lydia Torres and my granddaughter. We need every scrap of information on Lydia Torres now, I commanded, opening my laptop. I searched her name. Several common profiles appeared, but when I added our city to the search query, I found it. A local newspaper article from 4 years ago. The headline screamed, Young mother missing. Family asks for help locating Lydia Torres. The accompanying photograph showed a young woman, perhaps 23, with long hair and a troubled look. The article stated she had vanished, leaving behind her 2-month-old baby girl. Lydia, I whispered, the name of my granddaughter. Lydia Torres disappeared and left the baby. Kevin read over my shoulder. Or maybe she didn't leave her. Maybe Mia made her disappear. The horror of the possibility sent a deep shiver of revulsion through my entire being. You think Mia killed Lydia, too? So think about it, Robert, Kevin pressed. Mia needed a baby to complete her perfect family facade for Charles. She may have preyed on Lydia, found a vulnerable target, and once she had the baby, she eliminated the birth mother, the only loose end. It was a horrific theory, but it fit the chilling pattern of Mia's calculated malice. I found another article, 6 months old. Remains of missing young woman found, identified as Lydia Torres. They had found her body in an abandoned lot outside the city. Cause of death? Head trauma, the exact same clinical description given for Charles. The coincidence was an insult. She killed them both, I said, my voice shaking with unspeakable rage. She killed Lydia to steal the baby, and then she killed Charles to steal the money. Kevin grasped my hand, his expression stern. Robert, this is no longer a personal investigation. This is too big. We have to go to the police right now. He was right. We had enough evidence for 2 homicides, possibly more. I called the local precinct, reported a double murder, and was given an appointment with Detective Jack Roberts for the next morning. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I tossed and turned, consumed by Mia's lies, Charles's death, Lydia Torres's fate, and the true identity of my granddaughter. Lydia was not my blood, but that was utterly irrelevant. She was Charles's daughter in every sense that truly mattered. He had loved and protected her as his own. And now, that innocent child was in the care of a double murderer, the same woman who killed her biological mother and her adoptive father. I could not allow Mia to remain near her. I had to protect Lydia. But first, the police had to believe my unbelievable story. At 9:00 a.m., Kevin and I arrived at the precinct, a cold, gray building smelling of stale coffee and desperation. Detective Jack Roberts met us, a man in his mid-40s with the penetrating eyes of someone who sees too much darkness. I began the story from the beginning. Charles's death, the blanket, the hidden phone, the messages, the plan, the birth certificate, and the articles on Lydia Torres. Detective Roberts listened in absolute silence, taking meticulous notes, examining every piece of evidence. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "This is serious, Mr. Vance. Very serious. If true, we're looking at 2 premeditated homicides, possibly 3, if we include the girl's biological father." I was stunned. The biological father. If Lydia wasn't Mia's daughter, she had to have a father. I didn't find anything about him, I admitted. The detective wrote a note. "I'll investigate. But first, I need to verify this evidence. I'm going to reopen your son's case. I'm going to request an exhumation for a second autopsy, and I'm going to thoroughly investigate the death of Lydia Torres. I'm also bringing in Ethan Hayes for interrogation." An enormous relief washed over me. Finally, someone with authority believed me. "And Mia? Will you arrest her now?" The detective shook his head. "Not yet. I need more hard, physical evidence before issuing an arrest warrant. I don't want her to bolt if she suspects we're closing in." His logic was sound, but the helplessness infuriated me. "And in the meantime, Lydia is still with her. I understand your concern, Mr. Vance, but legally, Mia is the child's guardian. I cannot remove her without a court order, and for that, I need proof that is irrefutable in court. The phone is strong, but a clever lawyer could argue it was fabricated. I need forensic evidence, clear testimonies, solid connections." I felt utterly defeated. "How long will this take?" Kevin asked. The detective shrugged. "If I find what I'm looking for, maybe a couple of weeks. If not, it could be months. I couldn't endure months." "There's one more thing," I interjected. "Mia was extremely nervous yesterday, glued to her phone, looking around constantly. I have a bad feeling she's planning something." The detective wrote it down. "All right. I'm immediately placing discreet surveillance on her house. If she tries to run, we'll know." That provided a sliver of comfort. The following days were a torment of anxiety. Detective Roberts called every few days. Ethan Hayes was brought in, initially denying everything, claiming Mia and he were mere work acquaintances. But when confronted with the phone's photos and messages, he confessed to the affair, admitting Mia had talked about getting rid of Charles, but swearing he never agreed to the murder. The bank transfers proved otherwise. He couldn't explain the $200,000 Mia transferred to him, only claiming it was a loan. After 24 hours, Ethan lawyered up and was released, but the investigation continued. The exhumation of Charles's body proved to be the turning point. The second autopsy found what the first had missed: clear signs of a struggle on his wrists, bruises consistent with being restrained. It was confirmed. Charles was restrained and forcibly pushed down the stairs. Tears of grief and vindication streamed down my face. My son was murdered, and he deserved justice. The intensified investigation into Lydia Torres also confirmed the direct link. The land where her body was found belonged to a construction company where Ethan Hayes had worked as a supervisor. The trail was now clear. Furthermore, the adoption records were scrutinized. There were none. Lydia was illegally registered as Mia's biological daughter. Someone had deliberately falsified documents to erase the trace of Lydia Torres. "We are building the case, Mr. Vance," the detective told me confidently. "Piece by piece, it all connects. Soon, we'll have enough for the arrest." Another agonizing week passed. Then, in the dark hours before dawn, my phone rang. It was Detective Roberts, his voice tight with urgency. "Mr. Vance, I need you at the precinct immediately. It's about Mia." My heart seized. "What happened?" A short silence followed. "She tried to flee. We intercepted her at the airport. She had tickets for herself and for Lydia. They were leaving the country. I threw on clothes and raced to the precinct with Kevin. Detective Roberts led us to an observation room. Behind the glass, Mia sat handcuffed, her flawless facade shattered, makeup smeared, hair disheveled. "We arrested her 2 hours ago," the detective explained. "She had fake passports for herself and the girl, and $500,000 in cash spread across her luggage." "Where is Lydia?" I asked, the only thing that mattered. "She's safe with social services. Scared, but physically fine. They need you to go there now to claim temporary guardianship as her grandfather." I could barely process the news. Lydia was safe, and I could finally have her. "I want to see her now," I said, unable to wait. "Of course," the detective said. "But first, I need you to see this." He played a recording of the interrogation. Mia, defiant, stonewalled the detective, demanding a lawyer. "We have the phone you hid in Lydia's blanket," the detective countered, his voice quiet but devastating. "We have the messages where you planned your husband's murder. We have the transfers to Ethan Hayes." Mia turned ashen. That phone. How?" she stammered, instantly realizing her catastrophic mistake. The detective leaned forward, the final executioner blow. "Your father-in-law found it. Robert Vance, the man whose son you murdered. The man who is now going to keep Lydia while you rot in a cell." Mia's face contorted into pure, venomous fury. That meddling old fool. I knew I should never have let him near the girl. I knew he was snooping. That's why I had to leave. "Disappear?" the detective asked, dropping the final bomb. "How did you make Lydia Torres disappear?" Mia fell silent, her breathing ragged. The detective placed a photograph on the table. The smiling face of Lydia Torres. Lydia Torres, Lydia's real mother. The girl who vanished 4 years ago. The one we found dead in a lot belonging to your accomplice, Ethan. Mia closed her eyes. "I want a lawyer." I'm not saying another word. The recording ended. The detective looked at me. She'll break. The evidence is overwhelming. Ethan is also arrested and is talking, blaming Mia for everything, claiming she manipulated him, that he was simply afraid of her. Cowards always turn on each other. "Tell me what else Ethan said," I demanded. The detective flipped his pad. Ethan confessed Mia had proposed the plan. Wait for Charles to be alone, push him down the stairs, fake an accident, and they would split the life insurance. "What about Lydia Torres?" Kevin asked, horrified. The detective turned a page. That's the darkest part. According to Ethan, Mia met Lydia Torres at a local clinic. Lydia was a vulnerable, isolated patient with pregnancy complications. Mia saw the opportunity, befriended her, and offered to let her stay after the baby was born. Lydia accepted, having nowhere else to go. Mia lied to Charles, faking her own pregnancy symptoms. When Lydia gave birth, Mia stole the baby, telling Charles she'd had a sudden home birth, And Lydia Torres? Ethan claims Mia sedated her, drove her to that lot, and killed her, same method. Head trauma. Tears streamed down my face. Mia was more than a murderer. She was a predatory monster who had stolen a baby and then killed both the birth mother and the adoptive father for money. And Lydia's biological father? I asked, numbly. Lydia Torres never registered a father. We are still investigating. Finally, I was led to the social services wing. In a quiet waiting room, my granddaughter was playing with blocks. Lydia, I whispered. She looked up, saw me, and ran, burying herself in my arms. Grandpa Robert! I crushed her against my chest. I'm here, my love. Everything is going to be all right now. A social worker, Mary, explained the protocol. I completed the evaluations, and at the end of the day, I signed the papers. Lydia was safe. I walked out of that building, holding Lydia's hand, her tiny, trusting grip a physical promise. In the car, she slept on my lap. When we arrived home, I put her down gently on my bed, covering her with a soft blanket. I sat beside her, watching her tranquil sleep. She looked so much like Charles. She was his daughter, in every way that truly mattered. I promise I will protect you, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, the initial blind rage now tempered by an enduring, fierce commitment to the forgiveness and life that this innocent child represented. Justice was a slow burn, but Lydia's safety was my immediate, powerful victory. We had said our strained goodbyes to Detective Roberts, the weight of the investigation now resting squarely on his shoulders. Kevin and I left the precinct, the morning sun feeling cold and distant. What do we do now? Kevin asked, his voice raw with exhaustion. Wait, I said, the word a bitter taste on my tongue. Wait and pray that they find enough to arrest her. The days that followed became a slow-motion torture. Every tick of the clock was a reminder of Lydia being in that house with Mia. I worried about her safety, worried that Mia might sense the net closing in and try to flee again, or worse. Detective Roberts called me regularly with updates, the scant information barely enough to sustain me. He'd brought in Ethan Hayes for questioning. Ethan, the coward, denied everything initially, claiming he barely knew Mia, saying they were just casual work acquaintances. But when the detective showed him the damning photos and the messages from the burner phone, Ethan finally broke. He confessed to the affair, admitting that Mia had talked about getting rid of Charles, but he vehemently swore he never agreed, claiming he thought she was deranged and that he wanted no part of her murderous fantasy. However, the bank transfers told a different, undeniable story. The detective pressured him, showing him the statements, the 200 knock-on. Maya had wired him just 3 months after Charles's death. Ethan, stumbling and frantic, couldn't explain it, claiming it was a loan from Mia to start a business, a claim he couldn't back up with a single piece of documentation. I'm holding him for 24 hours, the detective had told me. I hope he confesses. If not, I have to release him. I just don't have enough to keep him detained. That night, Ethan demanded a lawyer and immediately stopped talking. Roberts was forced to release him, but the core investigation was moving forward with relentless force. They had successfully exhumed Charles's body. The second autopsy revealed critical information the first pathologist had missed entirely. Clear signs of struggle on his wrists, bruising that indicated someone had forcibly restrained him. It was not, the detective confirmed, an accidental fall. Your son was subdued and then violently shoved down those stairs, Mr. Vance. Tears, hot, painful tears, finally ran down my face. The agonizing truth was now confirmed, and Charles, my brilliant son, was finally receiving the justice he deserved. They also delved deeper into the death of Lydia Torres. They discovered the abandoned land where her remains were found belonged to a shell company, a company where Ethan Hayes had recently worked as a supervisor. The connection was now undeniable. Ethan had access to that secluded spot and could have easily dumped and buried the body without suspicion. Furthermore, they scrutinized Lydia's adoption papers, or rather, the complete lack thereof. Legally, the child was fraudulently registered as the biological daughter of Mia and Charles, but the original birth certificate we found told the truth. Someone, Mia and Ethan, no doubt, had falsified those documents to erase Lydia Torres from existence. "We are building an airtight case, Mr. Vance," the detective assured me. "Every piece is fitting into place. Soon, we will have enough to secure the arrest." One more gut-wrenching week passed. A week of fear, sleeplessness, and agonizing uncertainty. Then, in the early hours of one morning, my phone blared. It was Detective Roberts, his voice tight with controlled urgency. "Mr. Vance, I need you at the precinct now. It's about Mia." My heart stopped dead. What happened? The silence that followed was terrifying. "She tried to flee. We intercepted her at the airport. She had tickets for herself and Lydia. They were hours away from leaving the country forever. I dressed in less than 5 minutes, Kevin already racing to my door. We arrived at the cold, clinical precinct, where Roberts was waiting. He ushered us immediately to an observation room. Through the thick glass, I saw Mia. She was sitting in a metal chair, handcuffed, her immaculate makeup smeared, her composure utterly shattered. "We arrested her 2 hours ago," the detective explained. When she attempted to pass through security, our alert system flagged her. She was carrying sophisticated fake passports for herself and the girl, and over $500,000 in cash divided across multiple suitcases. "Where is Lydia?" I demanded, desperation tearing at my voice. "She's with Child Protective Services." "She's fine. Scared, but safe. They need you to go there to identify yourself as her grandfather, to arrange temporary placement with you while we sort out the legal guardianship." I was overcome. Lydia was safe, finally out of that woman's poisonous grip, and I would be able to hold her, protect her, as I should have been able to all along. "I want to see her now." The detective nodded. "Of course. But first, I need you to see this." He played a recording of the interrogation. Mia was defiant, crossing her arms. "I have nothing to say. I want a lawyer." The interrogator was unfazed. "He's on his way, Mia. But in the meantime, perhaps you can explain why you were attempting to flee the country with $500,000 in cash and a child on a forged passport?" Mia remained silent, staring blankly at the table. The detective continued, his voice low and relentless. "We have evidence. Mia. Messages. Photos. Bank transfers. We know about Ethan. We know about Lydia. We know about Charles. Everything." Hearing Charles's name, Mia's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear and a terrifying, cold hatred. "You don't know anything," she hissed. "You can't prove a single thing." The detective offered a small, knowing smile. "Oh, but we do. We have the phone you hid inside Lydia's blanket. The same one you threw in the trash, believing no one would ever find it. We have the messages where you planned your husband's murder. We have the transfers to Ethan Hayes." Mia's face drained of all color. "That phone. How?" she choked out, instantly realizing her admission. The detective leaned closer to the camera. "Your father-in-law found it. Robert Vance. The man whose son you stole and murdered. The man who is now going to keep Lydia while you rot in a cell. Mia's expression curdled from panic to pure, venomous fury. That disgusting, meddling old man. I knew I shouldn't have let him near the girl. I knew he was snooping. That's why I had to disappear before it was too late. Disappear? The detective challenged, dropping the name like a tactical weapon. How did you make Lydia Torres disappear? Mia? Mia fell silent, her breathing hitching. I don't know who you're talking about. The detective placed a photo on the table. A picture of the young, smiling Lydia Torres. Lydia Torres. Lydia's real mother. The girl who vanished 4 years ago. The one we found dead in a lot that belongs to the company your accomplice, Ethan, worked for. Mia closed her eyes tightly. I want a lawyer. I am saying nothing else. The detective sat back, his job done. Suit yourself. But this evidence isn't going away. We have enough to convict you for double homicide, fraud, and falsification of documents. You will spend the rest of your life in prison. The recording ended. Detective Roberts looked at me. She still won't confess, but she will. The evidence is simply overwhelming. What about Ethan? I asked. We've arrested him again. He's in another room, and he's talking. He's blaming Mia for everything, Roberts reported. He claims she manipulated him, that he was simply following her orders because he was afraid of her. Cowards always point the finger. And tell me what else Ethan confessed to, I urged. The detective opened his notepad. According to Ethan, Mia approached him 4 years ago while they were having their affair. She was bored with her marriage, complained that Charles was controlling, and wanted a different, wealthier life. She proposed the lethal plan. Wait until Charles was alone, push him down the stairs, and split the insurance money. My stomach churned, the details of my son's calculated death making the anger flare up again. Ethan claimed he refused at first, but Mia twisted his arm, showing him the $500,000 policy, promising him $200,000 and a life together. Kevin, who had been listening with grim silence, finally spoke. What did he say about Lydia Torres? The detective turned the page. That's where the story gets darker. Gentlemen, according to Ethan, Mia met Lydia Torres at the hospital. Lydia was a vulnerable patient, pregnant, alone, and without resources. Mia saw an opening. She befriended Lydia, offered her a place to stay after the birth. Lydia accepted. She had no one else. My hands began to shake. Mia had planned everything from the start. She wanted the baby. The detective confirmed my horrific realization. Exactly. According to Ethan, Mia then faked her pregnancy to Charles, wearing loose clothing, faking symptoms. Charles never suspected a thing. When Lydia gave birth, Mia simply took the baby, lying to Charles that she'd had a sudden, quick birth at home. And Lydia? What happened to her? My voice was a shaky whisper. The detective took a long, heavy breath. Ethan says Mia drugged her, something to incapacitate her. She drove her to the lot where they found the body and killed her. Same method as with Charles. Blunt force head trauma. Tears ran unchecked down my face. Mia wasn't just a murderer. She was a predator, a monster who had killed a defenseless girl, stolen her child, and then murdered my son for his money. And Lydia's real father? I asked. According to the few records we've found, Lydia never registered the father. We're investigating, but for now, there's no trace. I wiped my eyes. I want to see Lydia, please. The detective led me to another section of the building, a quiet waiting room with children's toys. A social worker was there, and in a corner, playing quietly with blocks, was my granddaughter. "Lydia," I whispered. She looked up, saw me, and ran across the room. "Grandpa Robert!" I scooped her up, crushing her against my chest. She clung to me, scared and confused, but miraculously safe. "I'm here, my love," I murmured into her hair. "Everything is going to be all right now." The social worker, Mary, approached. "Mr. Vance," Detective Roberts explained the situation. "We need to conduct a formal evaluation before placing Lydia with you, but all indications are that you are the best option for the child." "I will do whatever is necessary," I promised, my voice thick with emotion. "I just want to take care of her, to protect her." Mary smiled warmly. "I know, and I can see the connection. That's what matters." I spent the next hours with Lydia, talking, explaining that she would be staying with me for a while, leaving out the dark details of Mia's fate for a time when she was older and could process the truth. For now, she only needed love and the feeling of absolute safety. Mary conducted the necessary checks, interviewed me about my capacity to care for a 4-year-old, and asked about my support network. Kevin stayed with me the entire time, my quiet, unwavering source of strength. By the end of the day, Mary gave her final approval. "Lydia can stay with you temporarily, Mr. Vance. There will be follow-up visits and eventually a hearing for permanent custody, but for now, you are her legal guardian." I signed the papers, took Lydia's hand, and we walked out of that terrible building. Kevin drove us home. Lydia fell asleep on my lap during the entire ride, her breathing soft and peaceful. When we arrived at my house, I carried her to my bedroom, gently laying her on my bed and covering her with a soft, warm blanket. I sat beside her, watching her sleep. She was the absolute image of Charles. Though she did not share my blood, she was his daughter in every way that truly counts. "I promise I will protect you," I whispered, the remnants of my rage now solidified into a fierce, enduring forgiveness for the sake of this innocent, miraculous child. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here